So I'm going to get us started by just saying a little bit about the opera Carmen. And now, Carmen is an opera by Bizet. It's written in, I think, 1875. Carmen, the source for Carmen was his idea to write an opera based on the novel. It's a small novella by Prosper Mérimée. We think that Bizet was studying Mérimée when he was in Rome, and the idea to do something with it stuck in his head. Bizet was sort of forced to write opera comic music. So the music of the Secadilla or the Habanera that we all know, or the Toreador song. These are things that Bizet actually hated about the piece. He liked the fourth act. He liked that part of the music which is almost like Italian verismo. That's really hard hitting. But I think what makes Carmen an amazing piece is that it has both. It's what holds us and grabs us. So even though he didn't appreciate that part of the music, I think the piece wouldn't be as successful without those. The most famous piece from Carmen, the piece that we all know, in fact, I think it's the very first piece I can remember seeing on the opera stage, is of course the Habanera, which you hear those four notes and you know exactly what piece it is and what the next part of the line is. The Habanera as a form has a really interesting journey. Habanera means of Havana, from Havana, but actually the dance form starts in the French court in the 18th century. And the French court being the dominant court in Europe, it was popularized then to the Spanish court. And then through colonialism, it traveled from the old world to the new world, um, um, most stunningly in Cuba, where it combined with two African rhythmic principles. One is tresillo, which is, if you think of a bar that has eight, is separated into eight beats, it would be 3 plus 3 plus 2. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then it mixes with something called backbeat, which is syncopating. Um, what in a normal bar would be the rest, the offbeat. Actually, in the habanera, it actually is the on beats. So I can't hold them. Okay. So if one hand is snapping the tresillo, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and the other one's doing the other one.
Oh wow. Well,
And that's just snapping. And that's where that rhythm comes from. It gets super popular in Cuba, and then we always think of culture as coming from the colonizer to the colonized, but of course, in fact, culture moves both ways, and it moved back from Cuba to Spain. It becomes it becomes incredibly popular in Spain, so much so that the rest of Europe assumes it is Spanish, and it becomes the quintessential Spanish music for the rest of Spain, not realizing that it's not actually a Spanish music. Um, it then returns to France, and people like Jules Massenet, when he writes his opera El Cid, he has to include a habanera. Ravel had to include a habanera when he writes the pictures of Spain. Saint-Saëns did the same thing, and of course, Bizet, when writing Carmen, had to include a habanera. Bizet had heard it. He'd heard this song. He thought it was a folk song, so he notated it down and introduces it in the opera as the habanera, as wholly original. And then someone pointed out to him that it wasn't actually a folk song. It had a composer, and Berlioz had to correct the score and admit that actually the bulk of the melodic material of the habanera is by a Spanish composer. I think this is really beautiful how it travels from France to Spain, to the New World, back to Spain, and back to France.
It's also interesting. It also went to Argentina.
Yeah, but how did
and
it?
South America.
I'm sure you guys will tell us how it traveled south from Cuba.
You know, people have looked at a lot of sheet music published in the late 1800s through Latin America, from Argentina, Chile, all the way up to New Orleans, and you find this rhythm everywhere. And that was like how popular music was consumed at that time, was sort of piano kinds of sheet music, and you can find this rhythm everywhere under a bunch of different names, and of course in different places it's personalized in different ways. Tango personalizes it quite a bit, and it evolves within parts of tango. But it's really interesting watching how it is really just everywhere in the below New Orleans.
The habanero from Spain traveled not only to Europe, but to Argentina and throughout Latin America. And there was a constant back and forth, really, of these different genres. And in the very early history of the tango, we know that the habanero was one of the most popular dances at the time. We're talking about the 1880s. The habanero was just one of the main influences in the evolution of the tango, along with a less well-known influence, which was the Afro-Argentine. So just like jazz evolved in New Orleans from the European and African contributions, as well as in Cuba, the habanera, also from Spanish and African elements. In Argentina, there was at the time, again, 1880s, around there, 70s, 80s, a large Afro-Argentine contingent, and they had their drumming traditions with the types of rhythms that you demonstrated them. And they had their dances that were most popular in the Mardi Gras type, the carnival processions. And as the tango evolved, the local dancers started adding elements of the African dance. And that's one among many reasons why it was considered so scandalous, because there was some hip shaking involved.
Origins of tango are very complex and no one really knows what happened. Some of them say it's European influence, others say it's like heavy African influence. I think I'm with you, it's just one mix. Over time, this rhythm went away. And it became this. Are you deep? And so essentially, there's 3 genres in tango. There's a waltz and a tango and a milonga. This became modern day milonga. Milonga campera is still played very actively. It hasn't gone away. There's a lot of pieces that will use both.
Should we play?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Apprivoisie, et c'est bien heureux qu'on l'appelle, s'il lui convient de l'user. Rien n'est fait de ne se briller, l'un parle bien, l'autre se tait, et c'est l'autre que je préfère. Il n'a rien dit, mais il me plaît. L'amour est enfant du bohème, il n'a jamais connu de loi. Si tu ne m'aimes pas, je t'aime. Si je t'aime, regarde-toi. Si tu ne m'aimes pas, si tu ne m'aimes pas, je t'aime. Et si je t'aime, regarde-toi.
Everyone asks me what the bandoneon is, and they all think it's an accordion. I say yes because it's the closest thing I can think of, because it works under a bellows system. Air goes in, there's reeds inside of it. I hit a button, air goes in, sound comes out. And an accordion works the same way. That's essentially all it has in common. So it's very hard for an accordion to do this. For those in the back, I'm using my heel. Tango is the only popular dance so far that doesn't use percussion for people to dance. So all of the instruments take the role of the percussion. And so the bandoneon developed when we started doing how do we get people to move without percussive instruments. So the foot is used a lot. This is called a marcato. It's a very basic rhythm. Another one is, you'll hear in the next song. And in my left hand, I'm something called a drag. They say this is one of the hardest instruments to learn. I don't think that's true. I think all instruments are hard to learn at high levels.
It doesn't help that all the keys are out of order.
Right. So I think it has to do with learning curve. Like a guitar, you learn a couple of chords on guitar and you can play in a band. Bandoneon, like it's a good year of sounding terrible before you can do anything.
And they're in a different order when you breathe in and out.
It was made in Germany, and it's believed that Italian sailors brought it over to Buenos Aires. There are different types of bandoneons, but this one specifically, because of the sound, stayed in tango. In the beginning, tango, most of the ensembles were flute, guitar, and violin, string instruments. And then slowly this became incorporated in the orchestra sound. And now it's become like the most iconic instrument for tango.
This piece sets Carmen as a cabaret experience with the audience at tables, with Carmen as a cabaret performer, and some bawdy humor, to say the least, that then tries to implicate the audience in the really awful, homicidal, misogynistic piece that it is, and in that way to get at what's all underneath it. The other thing it does is a major influence of mine in creating the piece was film noir, but also the Spanish response to film noir, so neo-noir, which is most wide known in the films of Pedro Almodovar. And in particular, the inspiration for this piece was a film called Mala Educación, which is about a lot of things, but a central character is a trans woman who lives in a very difficult society and fights tooth and nail just to have her own identity, even unto death. And in a way, this reminded me very much of Carmen's journey. And our piece explores violence against trans women. It also explores just gender as an expanded understanding. Carmen, of course, has one of the, well, to use Heyni's word, one of the great absurdities and great misogynists in the opera canon, which is, of course, Escamillo. And we're very lucky to have Alex Alburqueque, who is not absurd or a misogynist, just plays one on TV. And while Alex is going to come up here, because after this I want us to be able to get to the dance itself, I just want to ask Emily, because Emily's from my world, I think. Yes. Which is Tango neophyte. At that. So I just wanted to ask Emily about her experience of rehearsing this piece and trying to find the tango elements in it, and then also adding in Max and Heyni.
I think the most challenging thing for me has been letting go a lot of opera conventions and letting tango conventions take over. And a lot of that is timing and certain things. But it's been great, and Max has been very helpful being in the rehearsals and incorporating pieces slowly.
Part of this has been giving ourselves permission to not approach the music the way it's supposed to be done, and that's especially true vocally, perhaps to sing it in a different way, and also to free ourselves up musically to do the things that we know our colleagues will gasp at, and to delight in the idea of them gasping at.
So we've talked a lot about the bum idea, which is only really in tango of the last 80, 90 years, a small bit of what tango is. There's this other rhythm called playing in four, which we do a lot. You like 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. So actually some of the most tangifying parts we've done in this are in some of those sections where we're really able to play and have fun. She mentioned the syncopa earlier and playing for. And this particular piece that we're about to play, I think you'll see a lot of that flavor.
Shall we do it?
Yeah.
Señor, señor, cara de soldado. Il a torero, me fait sa padre, pour plaisir, il s'en est commun. Plaisir, la jour de fête, le cirque plein, et io cavallo. Il vient, va pas encore. Apostrophe, il s'est apaillé, pousse jusqu'à la finale, car c'est la fête du courage, c'est la fête de Jean du cœur. Allons, allons, soja bien, oui, soja combattant, le noix de regard, et que l'amour t'attend, toréador, l'amour t'attend. Soja bien, oui, soja combattant, le noix de regard,